Welcome to Walt Disney Animation Ranked, a three-part series where we're ranking all 58 feature-length animated films released by the Walt Disney Company. Olympic swimmer Caeleb Dressel is currently at the Tokyo Olympics and just added 2 more gold medals to his previous 2, bringing his gold medal collection to a total of 4 now, per Team USA. This is part 2 of 3. What must it have been like to live in a time when feature-length animated films were perceived as folly? Growing up in the era of the Disney Renaissance means that feature animation was always just part of the family movie landscape. Not only that, Dessel recently set a record at the Games in his first individual swimming race, shattering the previous fast time per Olympics. The 6 feet 2 inches Olympian now holds a record for one of the fastest times in the men's 100-meter freestyle, via Swimming World magazine. Dressel made his Olympics debut at the 2016 Rio Games. But the Walt Disney Company, now one of the biggest behemoths in all of the corporate world, was once on death's door and hoping beyond hope that a hand-drawn animated film would make a profit. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, once dubbed Disney's Folly, became a massive worldwide hit, and so a new storytelling medium was born. His first ever appearance was marked by winning his first gold medals when he competed in the group swimming events, 4x100 freestyle and the 4x100 medley. With the arrival of Frozen 2, Walt Disney Animation Studios has released 58 animated features over 82 years. Consider this the definitive, legally binding "sorry, I don't make the rules, I just follow them" ranking of all of those 58 films. 40. That year he also participated in the 100-meter freestyle but came up short, placing 6th. Peter Pan, 1953. Some elements of Peter Pan are nigh unbeatable. A number of the songs are still quite tuneful and catchy, such as the sweet and haunting opener, "The Second Star to the Right." Also, the animation is vibrant and colorful, and a fine reminder of how talented the artists at Disney Animation were when given free rein and a decent budget. But now he has his redemption story. On July 29, Dressel earned his first solo Olympic gold medal, reports Associated Press. He accomplished this feat by beat Australia's defending champion with the time of 47.02 seconds. Caeleb Dressel's early life. Dressel was born in Green Cove Springs, Florida on August 16, 1996, to Michael and Christina Dressel. And Captain Hook is one of the most instantly devious, nastily gleeful villains in the studio's history. But he has 2 older siblings, his brother, Tyler, and sister Caitlin, and a younger sister, Sheridan. There's the whole painful business of this film being, like the JM his father swam in college, as did his sister at Florida State University per USA Swimming. But he first started testing the waters, so to speak, when he was just 5 years old. Many of his hobbies he had while growing up were water-related, such as being in the pool, boating, and wakeboarding. Barrie play which inspired it, painfully retrograde and downright offensive in its depiction of women and people of color. When he wasn't in the water, he played sports on land, like soccer, football, and track, according to his website. In 2019, it's very hard to watch the way Wendy is treated. At one point, a group of mermaids tries to kill her as Peter Pan. The object of their affection just sits back and laughs, as well as the segment with Native Americans and not wince. He attended his hometown's Clay High School and competitively swam for his school as a teen, per Florida Times-Union. The good parts of this movie are great, the bad parts are jaw-dropping. 39. The Rescuers 1977. There's something intensely sad about the story of The Rescuers. The setup is simple enough, so simple that it was able to inspire a 1990 sequel. 2 mice are tasked with rescuing a kidnapped child, and the ensuing film is their adventure in doing so. Here, the child is a helpless little girl named Penny, an orphan kidnapped by the greedy Madame Medusa, who desperately wants a priceless, rare diamond that is lodged in a cave so small that only a child could fit inside to grab it. It's, shall we say, a convoluted plot. Bob Newhart and Eva Gabor voice Bernard and Miss Bianca, the heroic mice on the job to rescue Penny. This is where he began to shine as a swimmer. In high school, he became the first swimmer under the age of 16 to start off a 200-yard free relay in under 20 seconds, per SwimSwam. A young Dressel broke many swimming records, including breaking his own high school record his senior year, according to SwimSwam. But this film, unlike its sequel, can't get over the starkly sad setup. By the time he was done with high school, he had an outstanding record that made him a desirable candidate for colleges around the country. Dressel is a record-breaking swimmer. Upon graduating, he decided to go to University of Florida, where he continued to excel in his swimming career. It's one thing for mice to try and rescue a kid. It's another to realize that Penny genuinely has no other hope of being saved than 2 mice. His time on the University of Florida's swimming team was highlighted with more stellar records. Dressel is a 10-time NCAA champion, picking up championship titles in the 50 and 100-meter freestyles, 100 butterfly, and 200-meter freestyle relay, every year from 2015 to 2018, according to his alma mater. In the latter year, Dressel became the first person to swim the 50-meter freestyle in under 18 seconds. It's too depressing to be even remotely fun or exciting. 38. Saludos amigos, 1943. In the early 1940s, as Walt Disney's animation studio was conscripted into duty for making propaganda during the Second World War, one of the tasks in front of his team was strengthening the relationship between the United States and Latin American countries, which could be susceptible to the scourge of Nazism. And he completed that feat twice on the same day, by clocking 17.81 seconds on his first try, and following it up by breaking his own record on the second try, clocking in at 17.63 seconds, via NBC. One of the results of this task was the 1943 feature Saludos Amigos. To date, he has more NCAA swimming titles than any other University of Florida alumnus. He currently holds a world record in the 100-meter butterfly and 50-meter freestyle, says his website. Dressel's unique tattoos. Of course, it would be hard to not notice that Dressel has several tattoos, especially his full sleeve. Unlike other sports where an Olympian might be covered in some sort of uniform from head to toe, as a male swimmer Dressel is usually seen bare-chested on the big screen, and his ink is quite obvious. One of his more noticeable tattoos is that of the Olympic rings, a recent tattoo he likely got after his first Olympic appearance. It is technically correct to call this a feature film, in that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences deems anything longer than 40 minutes a feature. But this movie is just 42 minutes long, comprising 4 shorts and a framing device of watching Disney and his animators traveling through South American countries like Chile and Peru. Only in the final sequence, Aquarela de Brazil, do the animators let loose with a colorful fantasia of sights and sounds. It's a wind-up for the eventual follow-up, which we'll get to soon, not a satisfying whole. 37. The symbol is etched on his right forearm. But most of his tats are on his left arm, as seen in a video by Mad Rabbit Tattoo, posted on YouTube. Bolt, 2008. The pervasive influence of Pixar Animation Studios on Disney's own animated fare became impossible to ignore with the 2008 film Bolt. The film focuses on a superheroic dog who gradually realizes that he and his owner Penny aren't embarking on various adventures. Instead, he's just an actor on a popular television show about a girl and her superheroic dog. There you can find the American flag, an eagle, a bear, an orange, and an alligator. Essentially, this is a redo of the story of Buzz Lightyear, with the caveat that the character paired with Bolt the dog, a shifty-eyed cat, is far less charming and far more obnoxious than Sheriff Woody ever was. Bolt is a generally tolerable film, though it's easy to wonder what the original version, titled American Dog and directed by Chris Sanders of Lilo and Stitch, would have been like. He says the gator represents his upbringing in his home state and his college, whose team is called Gators. He told Mad Rabbit Inc. this month that he was keen on getting tattoos because he's often seen in his swimming trunks, and one way to showcase more of his personality is through some body art. He is a newlywed, and she's a swimmer. Dressel's wife, Megan Hala, pictured above, was his high school sweetheart. Both aspiring swimmers, the two met during swimming training at the Bowles School Sharks in Jacksonville, Florida. The movie that wound up being released just can't shake the sense that the basic story was told already, and much, much better. 36. The Rescuers Down Under, 1990, the first sequel from Walt Disney Animation Studios. Yes, this is their first sequel of any kind, is surprisingly okay, despite being rife with flaws. Dressel proposed to Megan in 2019, and the couple got married this year on February 13, according to his Instagram profile. Just as Dressel did as a teenager, Hala also had an impressive swimming record in high school, winning 2 state championships and becoming a 4-time finalist, via Seminoles. Though the pair met and dated during their high school years, they did not go to the same college. In fact, his wife went to the same school as his older sister, Caitlin, and attended Florida State University.
The way this film executes the same setup as The Rescuers is more successful, in part because the boy being rescued from the clutches of an evil poacher is far from helpless. And there she too, had an impressive collegiate swimming career. But she didn't continue on with swimming as did Dressel. Instead, she chose a career in marriage and family therapy and graduated last year, per her Instagram. Dressel is the top American swimmer to watch, like Ryan Lochte and Michael Phelps before him. Dressel is now the swimmer to watch at the Tokyo Olympics. That is, ironically, also the problem with The Rescuers Down Under. With Phelps retired and Lochte failing to qualify for the Olympics, Dressel has taken on the reins for American men's swimming. And he remains on his current track, anticipating more gold medals. Despite the consistent comparisons, many are not sure if he can ever beat Phelps' gold medals record in swimming, via Olympics. Where Bernard and Miss Bianca were truly the only ones who could help poor Penny in the original, they feel like afterthoughts in a story where the kidnapped child effortlessly climbs a cliff face, frees a rare eagle, and then flies that eagle to freedom. But it's quite possible that Dressel still has a lot more Olympic Games left in him. This all occurs in the first 15 minutes. The Rescuers Down Under isn't a true high point of the Disney Renaissance, but it's still got some charms and unexpectedly thrilling action sequences. 35. Lady and the Tramp, 1955. This film features what is arguably one of the 3 or 4 most memorable images in Disney animation history. The scene in which the 2 title characters, on a starlit date outside an Italian restaurant, share a plate of spaghetti and end up sharing the same strand of pasta until they're nearly kissing is as romantic as Disney gets. And a good chunk of Lady and the Tramp balances a nostalgia for an earlier time. The film is set in a quaint American town in the early 1900s, with its star-crossed romance. At just 24 years old, the U.S. but, as with Peter Pan, there are unavoidably painful stereotypes here, culminating in the cruel Siamese cats that are an unnecessary diversion into racism. This film has its charms, but they're often cancelled out by other creative choices. 34. Swimming team captain has time to prove himself. Wreck-It Ralph, 2012. Some things, you just can't move past. And after shattering Australian Kyle Chalmers' record, The Guardian, no one can predict what other achievements this outstanding American swimmer will crack next. For this writer, it's the utter lack of logic in Wreck-It Ralph and its third-act bad guy reveal. In that twisty moment, we learn that the seemingly avuncular leader of the candy-coated racing video game Sugar Rush is actually a selfish racer from an older arcade game who somehow managed to hide out in Sugar Rush, and disguise himself, and remove the memories of the other characters in Sugar Rush, without anyone knowing except for the part where he removed the other characters' memories. Of course, the story preceding this reveal is perfectly okay, but it's the umpteenth buddy comedy from Disney and Pixar at a time when such stories didn't feel quite as fresh. The sequel isn't a whole lot better, but the relationship between Ralph and Vanellope von Schweetz is more fleshed out than it is here, and more is done with the world of the internet than is done with the world of sentient video game characters. 33. Lilo and Stitch, 2002. Like Stitch himself. Lilo and Stitch is the kind of movie that you either really love or really don't. Now that we're in an era of post-hand-drawn animation, it's easy to be nostalgic for this 2002 film, animated partially via watercolor. The story of a prickly little Hawaiian girl who encounters an equally prickly escaped alien prisoner is unquestionably distinctive, and hardly like the typical Disney animated film that became so dominant in the 1990s. Yes, there's a female lead, but she's genuinely feisty, where other female leads adopt feistiness as if it's a buzzword. Yes, there's music, but it's all in the form of Elvis Presley songs. He told reporters that he has come to rely not just on his skills and training, but his personal discipline to stay focused. And so on. Lilo and Stitch, on paper, is the kind of film Disney should keep making, even if the execution renders the final result somewhat distant and unemotional. 32. It is a lot different. Ralph Breaks the Internet, 2018. The friendship between Wreck-It Ralph, John C. I guess I thought it would be, I just didn't want to admit to it. Riley, and Vanellope von Schweetz, Sarah Silverman, serves as the foundation for Wreck-It Ralph. But it doesn't take long in the 2018 sequel Ralph Breaks the Internet for that friendship to be interrogated and deemed not terribly healthy. Vanellope is a vastly more interesting character in this follow-up, as it becomes clear that Ralph's dreams and hers don't match, and that's okay. Of course, as the title implies, it takes Ralph a little longer to reach that conclusion, though it's not like the Disney depicted version of the internet is actually as bad as, the actual internet. There's a bit more fun to be had in this sequel, specifically in the depictions of the Grand Theft Auto-inspired world Vanellope finds so appealing. 31. It's a lot tougher. The Three Caballeros, 1944. And here lies the follow-up to Saludos Amigos. You have to rely on yourself. There's no one to bail you out from a bad split, he said, via CBS. The Three Caballeros ostensibly continues the goal of Saludos Amigos, strengthening the bond of the US and Latin America, in a much more direct way. Here, the setup is that it's Donald Duck's birthday, because, sure, why not, and he's got some presents to sift through. Eventually, he meets up with the other two characters in the title, though not instantly. He, Jose Carioca and Panchito Pistoles go on a more detailed animated tour of Mexico and Latin America, in a film that's still not quite as wonderful as it could be, but pays off on the charm of the final segment of Saludos Amigos. Here, sequences like Bea and Donald's Surreal Reverie imply that Disney's animators had not lost their gorgeously hallucinatory touch in crafting unforgettable images, even if the film as a whole isn't at the same level. 30. The Great Mouse Detective, 1986. If you love modern Disney animation, don't forget that it all started here with an unassuming adaptation of a Sherlock Holmes-style sleuth. This one, of course, is a mouse named Basil of Baker Street. But The Great Mouse Detective, the film all about Basil and his exploits, is modestly charming. Co-directed by, among others, John Musker and Ron Clements, who would go on to direct a number of better films we'll mention soon. The Great Mouse Detective is a fairly slight adventure with rough animation. But the film had potential, and it also boasted a hilariously nasty villain, the odious Ratigan voiced by horror legend Vincent Price. The Great Mouse Detective is far from perfect, but a sign of what Disney animation could once again accomplish creatively. 29. Pocahontas, 1995. How far Disney animation has come, and how quickly they made changes. It would be wrong, to say the least, to suggest that Pocahontas was a truly faithful, respectful, and honest version of the supposed star-crossed romance between English settler John Smith and Native American woman Pocahontas at the dawn of the Western settlement of the New World. There are plenty of examples of how the Disney film deliberately distorted the truth in favor of a more dramatically interesting tale. But coming just 3 years after the inflammatory and controversial depiction of the Middle Eastern community in Aladdin, it's almost whiplash-inducing to see Pocahontas. The 1995 film is striking in its impressionistic design, boasts some wonderful songs and a great Alan Menken score, and is vastly more respectful to the Native American community than past Disney films would have suggested. The key romance, sadly, isn't nearly as tender as it ought to be, and its attempts at comedy are baffling to say the least. But the overall effect of the film is more complex than expected. 28. Tarzan, 1999. It's not that Tarzan is a bad film. Its blend of computer and hand-drawn animation in depicting the vine-swinging hero in the trees is alone enough to recommend it. But Tarzan had the misfortune of arriving at the tail end of the Disney Renaissance, giving off the vague vibe that audiences had seen this all before, just with slightly revised character names and tropes. The story of Edgar Rice Burroughs' hero is one of the most familiar in modern popular culture, having inspired plenty of TV and film adaptations. While this Tarzan has some charm, specifically in its less retrograde depiction of the Tarzan and Jane relationship, thanks in no small part to Minnie Driver's winning voice performance, its presence was less daring and more familiar by 1999. 27. Big Hero 6, 2014. When Disney bought Marvel, it was only natural to wonder when, not if, the comic book company would be represented among Disney's animated feature canon. In 2014, the result of that unexpected marriage arrived. Big Hero 6 was inspired not by one of the most obvious or ultra-famous Marvel superheroes. Still, its depiction of a hybrid version of San Francisco and Tokyo, as experienced by a grieving teenager who uses his dead brother's healthcare robot to solve his murder, is quite compelling and colorfully detailed.
Big Hero 6 has some of the same kinds of storytelling stumbles the Marvel Cinematic Universe has too. And, like a lot of MCU films, a real snooze of a villain. But the core relationship between Hero and his new robot pal Baymax is more emotionally complex than most MCU films can boast. 26. Tangled, 2010. The fable of the impossibly long-haired Rapunzel is one of the most recognizable in Western literature, but it took Disney a number of false starts and an extended development process to get its cinematic version off the ground. Finally, after ditching a hand-drawn version in favor of a wholly computer-animated film, they delivered the mildly charming Tangled. That title, coupled with the narration by Rapunzel's male foil Flynn Rider, makes clear that this movie wasn't intended only for girls. This intention is driven by the often ridiculous marketing notion that boys refuse to see movies about girls, but girls will see just about anything. Tangled, despite its silly title, is fun, well-paced, brightly animated and designed, and features another nastily passive-aggressive villain, coming after the malevolent Frollo and Hunchback. Yet it's still held back by seeming like a bit of a PR sop to appeal to boys. 25. 101 Dalmatians, 1961. At the time, 101 Dalmatians felt almost revolutionary for the Walt Disney Company, for a couple of reasons. This feature was the first Disney animated entry set in the present day. And second, the animation style was a radical shift from the clean lines and richly detailed design of past entries. Both to push feature animation in a direction that might please animators who wanted to see their line work more radically represented, and to save on the costs of drawing. 101 spot-covered Dalmatians. This film featured xerography, an animation technique created by the pioneering animation wizard Ub Iwerks, allowing easier copying of animation work from frame to frame. The resulting visual experience is rougher than other Disney films. What does work in the film is its adventurous spirit as the eponymous dogs escape the clutches of one of the most terrifying villains in Disney history, Cruella de Vil. It's not a subtle film, but its heights are unforgettable. 24. Mulan, 1998. There's an unspoken awareness throughout the Disney Renaissance that, to tell stories that capture the imagination more than 50 years after the studio's first feature film, animators would have to think beyond their upbringings and Western heritage. Thus, films like Pocahontas and Mulan were born, the latter of which was both charming and struggled to escape the Disney mold. Inspired by a story of a young Chinese woman impersonating a man in the army, Mulan is, on the surface, a compelling well-told story. Though our heroine's comic relief sidekick Mushu, voiced by Eddie Murphy, a few years before he'd be the donkey in Shrek, feels ported over from earlier Renaissance films. The action elements of Mulan stand up more than 20 years later, even if the comedy doesn't. 23. Frozen, 2013. You're just going to have to let it go that this film isn't higher on the list. Frozen was an out-of-the-box phenomenon in the late months of 2013, in its loose take of the Snow Queen. Here, the young woman Elsa, Idina Menzel, grapples with her ability to shoot ice out of her hands as she ascends the throne of Arendelle, eventually hiding away after plunging the country into a deep, eternal snow. It's up to her plucky sister Anna, Kristen Bell, plus a sentient snowman, a well-meaning ice salesman, and others to help make things right again. Where Frozen suffers is in its story. For a film ostensibly about the bond between two sisters, Anna and Elsa barely share any screen time together, in place of the obnoxious Olaf, sorry not sorry, hectoring trolls, and more. But yes, Let It Go is pretty good. 22. Frozen 2, 2019. It's next to impossible to imagine this movie somehow surpassing 6 years' worth of expectations. And in some ways, Frozen 2 does fall a bit short of the original Frozen. The mythology surrounding Queen Elsa and her special powers of ice and snow is given more attention in the sequel without making a whole lot of sense. As with the original, Frozen 2 is, at its best, an emotional experience where logic doesn't enter into play. Quite simply, the emotional highs are more effective here, hence this film's slightly higher placement. On the whole, the songs are consistent and solid. No, not even Into the Unknown can hope to top Let It Go for sheer entertainment value, but there's also no song here as terrible as Fixer Upper. And the trolls are barely in this one, which is also a win. Frozen 2 does represent a huge step forward for Disney's animators. Whatever this film's story problems are, it looks fantastic in its epic style scope and in the small details. Even A Drop of Water has depth and clarity of vision in this one. 21.
Hercules, 1997. Sometimes, the best thing a Disney movie can boast is its villain. Hercules, from directors John Musker and Ron Clements, has a tone of hipper than thou snark throughout, best represented by its bad guy Hades, voiced marvelously by James Woods. Channeling the slimiest Hollywood agent, Woods makes his Hades as sleazy as he is slick, as he wheels and deals his way through ancient Greece, attempting to conduct a hostile takeover of the human race. Hercules himself isn't a terribly fascinating lead character, But the big lug's romantic interest, Meg, voiced by the charming Susan Egan, is a cagier, sharper and more screwball female character than most Disney films had ever seen. Add to that gospel-infused songs, loopy humor, and striking animation, and it's almost not a problem that Hercules himself is a bit of a letdown. Cool posts from around the web.